I'm doing a Sons of God video part 3 because Louisa actually brought something up that I thought was very, very important. There are many of you who might be deceived by this, and so I want to make sure that you understand. God is not going to give us a word and then introduce a book of that word 2,000 years later. And one of the things that the Catholic Church has been really pushing is this Book of Enoch. Like all of a sudden the Book of Enoch showed up, and maybe it's been around for a while, but it suddenly is being pushed in order for us to, buy into some sort of like missing link in the Bible. That's not going to happen, you guys. Christ would have told us if that was going to happen, just like it's not going to happen that the golden plates suddenly show up through Joseph Smith or any other addition to the scroll. So here's what Louisa said. Interesting video. I came across the Book of Enoch 10 years ago, which is canonized in the Aramaic, I think that's what she means, Aramaic, Ethiopian Orthodox Bible. I assumed it wasn't part of the Bible canon because the papacy had intentionally wanted to cover over that Watchers, 200 fallen angels, had mixed with the daughters of men, producing the Nephilim, a race of giants. I justified it thinking that angels could materialize into human form because they had special powers, and apparently this was done to infiltrate the bloodline of Jesus. In my ignorance, I thought that made sense, but it sounds like a counterfeit faction of Christianity appealing to the flesh and desire of the unknown to distract and ultimately draw attention away from being in the heart and spirit and following God's commandments. Louisa has a really good way of articulating herself, and that is exactly right. God is not suddenly introducing new scripture 2,000 years later in order to substantiate crazy Hollywood or Catholic mystical ideas that have no precedence in scripture. And, the reason I say Hollywood and Catholic is because Hollywood and Catholicism like to, give you that version of spirituality that's super mystical and is, based on horror movies, like that's the kind of understanding that we have about spirits. A bunch of counterfeit Christians who grew up on horror movies. That's not the biblical version of spirits or casting out spirits or fallen angels or anything else. Angels do not have the same bodies as human beings. They do not marry nor are given in marriage, and they don't produce offspring with human beings. So this is something to get you jacked up in the flesh. It kind of reminds me of, not that long ago, I talked to you about Jonathan Cahn, that false prophet, calls himself a prophet, calls himself a rabbi, but he's writing a book, right? I mean, there's so much wrong with what he does, but he's written this book called The Return of the Gods. That's something that'll really get your flesh, right? Ooh, what is this Return of the Gods? Sounds like it could be a Hollywood movie. It's ridiculous. What are gods? Gods are nothing. We've been told that in the Bible, that gods are nothing. All of that is to get you freaked out and make you think that you need to educate yourself on Satan so that you can then, by the work of your own hands, avoid him. I mean, the word has told you resist him and he will leave. The word has told you that the power in you, the spirit in you, is greater than the power in the world, than the spirit in the world. So what are you afraid of? People who talk about these things have the appearance of godliness but deny God's power. They don't have understanding. They don't have faith in who God is and who he is in us and who we are in the world as a result. We're the light of the world. We carry his spirit. So that's all these people are doing, is they're appealing to your flesh and making you think that you missed something that's going to make the Bible now make sense to you. No. The thing that's going to make the Bible make sense to you is God's spirit. That's what you've been missing if you haven't been understanding his word. No extra books, no additions to the scroll. These people are accursed, and that's the bottom line. So, 2 things in this video. 1 is Christ is not going to suddenly introduce that book. 2, that book and other false doctrines have been established to make you think that this is the missing link that makes the word make sense. So you see what happens when you do not love truth? If you go to that book and you start adding to the scroll and you do not love truth and you think that God somehow, suddenly introducing something 2,000 years later, you're reading rabbinical commentaries, you're thinking that you need to go listen to rabbis because ethnic Judaism is a thing. Ethnic Judaism isn't a thing. in God anyway. A Jew is one who's been circumcised in heart. You start going to that rather than letting the word and God's spirit interpret itself, you're going to be deceived, because the word says angels do not marry. Angels have different bodies than human beings. And as I explained to you in the other videos, there's no concept for sons of God being angels or divine beings. There's no concept in Greek or in Hebrew in those contexts of scripture, period. These false doctrines have been planted to deceive. And I told you that those who are deceived, look at Louisa's humility. Look at where she's coming from right here. She says, in my ignorance, I thought that made sense. And she admits that this was coming from her carnality, that it made sense to her carnality. Louisa's not freaking out because I'm saying what the word says, which is, when you are deceived, it is because you have not loved truth. That's what the word says. That's not what Carrie says. It's what God says. When you are deceived, it is because you were handed over to deception by him because you did not love truth. You separated from truth somehow. Even if you did it in ignorance, just own it. Be accountable. I've modeled that for you. I've let you know when I was deceived about something, how I had stepped apart and how God had contended with me and let me know, this is why you were deceived. Are you different from me? I'm here serving you and yet exposing myself more than you. So when people get upset that I'm saying that, there's an issue in their heart. Because if I'm willing to do that, not only before myself and before God, but before you, how is it that others of you don't think that you have to do that? How is it that others of you think, oh no, my deception comes from somewhere else. My misunderstanding comes from somewhere else. I'm better than that. Well, go take that up with God then. Again, I've been telling you for a long time, you got to clean up what you're listening to, clean up your YouTube channel. I'm so encouraged to see that people are sharing their testimony that they are cleaning up their YouTube channels. Excuse me, what I mean by that, cleaning up the subscribers, the people they're subscribed to. That's awesome, you guys. That's awesome that you're willing to do that and that you want to be single-minded for God's truth and not be placing human beings in YouTube channels, commentaries, concordance, whatever it is. Any human being, I don't care where they are or who they are, and that includes me. It's awesome that you don't want to place that before God. That is critical in your covenant. I hope that cleared some things up. Thanks for listening. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next video.